なりおしまい。
And welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. In this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball, as usual. In particular, episode 80, which is called Goku versus Sky Dragon, or in the Japanese, it's called Imperial Match Goku versus Tenlong. And I hope I'm not blasting out right now. Before we get started, though, I'm going to let Brock do some of that stuff while I try and fix my mic.
So if you like what you hear from our content, it would be very appreciated if you were to like or subscribe or comment or share across social media, give us a rumble on Rumble, anything like that. It's something that really helps the analytics of the channel, and the algorithm just works that way. So if you think what we talk about is interesting at all, or if you think it might be beneficial to the discourse around media like Dragon Ball, not just Dragon Ball, we've talked about a few other things. We did a Spider-Man podcast. We're talking about maybe going into some Elden Ring talks. If that's something that would interest you, leave a comment on that.
We also upload on Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube and Tuesdays and Fridays on Rumble. So like Brock said, give us a subscribe. We would appreciate it. And comment whether or not you agree, you disagree. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Other than that, I think without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started on Imperial Match Goku versus Tenlong, or Goku versus Sky Dragon.
So there is one addendum that we need to address at the beginning of this episode.
Yes.
I don't think we have clips for it specifically, but it is something that we should discuss at the beginning of this one before we get too far into the story, because I think there's a logical progression beyond what this one action means, and this action being Goku's ability to catch the 4-star ball before it's scattered with the rest of the Dragon Balls, right?
Yes, we spoke about getting to it in the episode, and then we actually never got to it, and I think it's it's reasonable to say how we got lost up in what was happening in the episode, because what was going on with Bora and Upa is very important. Not to gloss over what happens with Goku and catching the 4-star ball, and that's kind of what we're trying to correct at this point.
Yeah, I think that it puts a nice little bow on the top of the cosmic story that we've been being told throughout this process, right? And there's a culmination that comes up to this single point, and it's like, what was the point of Goku going out for the Dragon Balls in the first place at the beginning of this whole major arc of the story, right? And that was to be able to get back his grandfather's ball, right? That 4-star ball.
And in other words, it is to pay reverence properly to the ancestral spirit. But it's actually interesting because Goku already has it, and the way that he catches it, it's already turned to stone, meaning that the lessons he's learned from it have already been solidified within his being, kind of indicating that he doesn't really need to gather the 4-star ball anymore. By redeeming the spirit of the father in Bora, he's already surpassed the lesson that it is to have the 4-star ball in the first place.
Right, he becomes synonymous with the 4-star ball, almost an aspect of reality, right? And that's what being the hero
It's
is,
fully
right?
integrated within him. Yeah.
And so he's a higher force in that sense. And this is where the sort of Superman symbology starts to come in, because it's almost supra-human, right? It's like it or a super, that's why it's Superman, but whenever you break down the etymology of it, saying that it's above human, right? It's more human than human, right?
I agree.
And that's something that can be confusing if you don't really know that um the specific usage like that, right? And what it's traditionally meant in a mythological sense.
And so the fact that Goku catches the ball, even though it's stone, is to say that not only has Goku grown past this, but he is paying proper reverence to it, and by doing so, he's gone beyond the idea of the ancestral spirit to that which redeems the ancestral spirit.
Right. And so symbolically he's catching the star, right?
Yes.
Because the Dragon Balls are stars being scattered across the land that can be grasped. It's
He
a way to grasp the
he's
stars, right?
also holding the idea, that chaotic idea of the wisdom always being in the unknown, within his hand. That idea of him kind of exploiting the system, or circumventing the rules, is very apparent as well.
So we've talked about the strengthening of his tail as well, right? And that's what that is that relationship to the chaotic. The ability to grasp the stars, to reach beyond the known into the potential of the unknown, the light and the darkness of the unknown, right? And so this is something that was integrated through the Baba saga, with him finding his father down in chaos, right?
Yep, I agree.
And so it's solidified, literally solidified in stone, but also sort of
It's set in stone, to use an idiom.
right. We started out Goku's training with chasing a word written on a stone, right?
Yeah.
This this symbolically comes up in this sense as well, where it's having to be able to go out into chaos, right, and find the defined goodness in it
Not
and
just the
bring it out
divine
like a seed
goodness,
of gold,
but
right?
the wisdom of the ancestral spirit.
Right. The God, the good, the definable good, right?
Well, and that's
That's
the thing.
the
I don't know if it's the
solidified. It's almost
God,
like a
because the God would be the highest ordinance, um ideal, whereas like
droplet. That's what I'm
the
trying to say.
experience, or the ancestral experience, is exactly what is embodied with the 4-star ball.
Right, that droplet of chaos.
Right. And so that's what Goku really grasps when he grabs the 4-star ball. And I know this is after Terror and Plague, but if you are a longtime listener, please stick with us, because we do want to make that addendum. We should have mentioned it during the episode, but man, that episode was very packed with meaning. So
There was a lot to
please
get
forgive
to.
us. We apologize, but please forgive us for missing that point.
Yeah, it really speaks to how much there is to unpack with Dragon Ball, where it's almost unbelievable to say, "Oh, we've talked about each episode for about twice the length of that episode," to try to unpack it, right?
And then still, like, some of the
And
episodes
to miss
we
things.
haven't hit
Yeah.
everything. It's like, whew, goodness. Anyways, anything else?
No, I think that we can get
All
into the
right.
episode.
So without further ado, this is now the discussion around episode 80, which is Goku versus Sky Dragon. It's one of the on the road training saga episodes, which, according to some sources, are filler, but I think they really do justice to the rest of the spirit of Dragon Ball itself.
Yeah, it's a really good way I didn't appreciate before for the themes of the show to be distilled into little short stories that can be told as sort of a, well, maybe you didn't watch every single episode of the last arc, but this is the we're going to express some of these ideas and here's the gist of it, right?
Right. So as Goku is training his strength by traveling along the road, he loses his balance and falls down into a ravine next to a river. Washing up, an old woman directs him to a nearby town where he finds a group of men accosting Chen Taiken's son, Shokin. Chen beats up two of the men, coughing afterwards, and Goku is stopped by from joining by Tenlong, who apologizes on the behalf of his brother and his goons.
Yes.
And so we get the setup for the story here, which is really a bottle episode. Which a lot of these training on the road sagas follow the same kind of format. Goku is traveling, he encounters a problem, he solves the problem, he continues traveling. And we just saw that with Terror and Plague, right? He
Right.
encounters the village, he tries to confront the problem. There's a slight mishap with the gourd, and he continues after he defeats them.
And of course, it can encapsulate sort of those Genesis ideas where, you know, essentially he does the whole naming process and has to cope with the idea that his name is now known to the world outside of himself because he's gone out into the world for his exploration of the unknown, right?
Right, he's experienced the consciousness of vulnerability, let's say.
So now we're kind of progressing into another nice little short story in an episode that's going to expand a little bit beyond that. And not, I don't think quite as deeply, but it is interesting how it progresses through some of these ideas here.
Right, and I think it adds to the legend of Goku as well. I think the anime actually enhances that in the way that maybe not the manga can't, but the manga didn't. So the manga included things that were absolutely necessary, whereas the anime filled some time with things that at the time didn't seem necessary. Like, let's make these episodes because we gotta wait for the manga to catch up with us. It's like, I don't know. These episodes really encapsulate some of the spirit of what the show's about. And so, as we've said previously, we are of the opinion that I mean the majority of filler is not bad in this anime. A
So
lot of
far,
people
there
think
really
there's a
hasn't been any
lot.
bad filler.
Yeah. I mean, some of the fandom thinks that a lot of the filler in Dragon Ball is particularly egregious, whereas I am not in that camp.
No, I've come to appreciate a lot of these episodes that exist between the major stories that we remember as the canon of Dragon Ball, right?
Right, exactly. And so, right. So a couple things we do want to discuss here is that um Goku meeting the crone archetype, for example, will come up again. We've already seen one kind of instance of this in which Goku in with Terror and Plague encounters the village aspect of it, but this is going to take it to the next level. So the old woman tells him to go find the greatest fighter in the village, which is Chen Tai Ken, right?
Right.
And he goes down there, and when he gets down there, as in Tenkai Tai Ken, is assaulted by some thugs who he easily overpowers, but he does cough many times, indicating that he is in some kind of frail health, which is kind of important to say that the decline of the masculine spirit, which protects that which is sacred, can undergo these moments or periods of vulnerability, which that's exactly what's happening here. And when we see later Ten Long, who plans to exploit the vulnerability of the paternal spirit, which protects the order of civilization, um, it is an unholy spirit which possesses Ten Long in order to do that.
Yeah, I think, how would I say, there is a a balance that's being set within the episode, right? And so there's an extremely opposite end of the spectrum expression that Tinlong is, where he is aware, he's self-aware of his appearance first of all, right? So whenever he arrives here and he apologizes for his brother, he is putting on a face for society that completely is in
Conflict.
it's in opposition to his actual mode of being, and he's
Right.
able to
Yeah.
conceal it and does that to maintain a certain status. And so it's a malice, right? It's sort of an integrated adversarial spirit.
Not fully integrated, but it is one that he has. It's almost a dual identity at this point because, as we see at the end of the episode, it is something that he's kind of able to master. But
Well, I do
uh,
want to talk about the beginning of this sort of sequence as well. Unless you have something else to say about that specific part. So, the setup of this episode is a reenactment of what has set up the situation that Goku is in now that he's gone out into the world, which is he's traveling along this road and he's balancing on his fingers. And so it's by his most, you could say, outward extremities, he's manipulating his path. And he's doing it agilely, but then he stumbles downward and he falls. Then he catches himself with his tail by a branch of roots or of the earth sticking out, right? And then that breaks and he falls down to the water and he meets an old woman and he asks the old woman where he can find somebody that's strong to challenge, right? And she points him toward a name. So she gives him a name that he can follow and then he goes out into the world. And so we see that reenactment of the falling down, catching himself, and he says whenever he catches himself by his tail, "See, I strengthened up my tail." He calls it out right in the original translation, and then he falls down anyway, and then interacts with the crone, who points him towards value. Right, he's looking for the chaos that he needs to encounter and integrate. She points him towards it, and then he goes that way along the chaos or the unknown or the water. Right, that's the river that he falls down to.
right, exactly.
And so it's a nice little setup for the sort of framing of what he's integrating throughout this episode, right?
I agree. And we already talked about a little bit of Chen Taiken's sickness and why the paternal and the sick paternal, let's say the sick man of Europe, right, is something that is um, present, and it's almost the nakedness of the paternal that it is. Ten Long is basically pointing out, right? He's Ham here, right? He's just pointing it out. Is it Ham? Yeah, it's Ham. No.
I think so. Well, maybe it is. I can't
You know
remember.
what I'm talking about,
I
though.
do know what you're talking about. That
All
pointing to the
descendants will be
nakedness.
slaves
Yeah.
by seeing the nakedness of thy father, right?
Right.
That's the idea here, and that Ten Long is planning to exploit the nakedness of the paternal of this village is an unholy spirit in and of itself.
Definitely. Yeah. And this is something that Goku is going, as a spirit, going to have to get involved with, right? In order to be able to set that right.
Right, because Goku challenges Chen Taiken to a fight after they encounter the thugs, and Taiken begins coughing as soon as the fight begins. His son rushes to help him, blaming Goku for inspiring this bout of sickness. When Goku asks Taiken about the techniques he just used, Taiken tells him it's called the Illusion Star Fist, and Goku offers to fetch him medicine and agrees not to engage with Ten Long. Despite being attacked by Tenlong and his brother, Goku makes it back with the medicine and is able to partially rejuvenate Taiken in the process.
Right. Um, there's a few things to say about this part. I like that Taiken, whenever he clashes with Goku, there's like a 3 or 4 frame attack he does against him where you see his fists like fly out as they pass in the air. And then I didn't even see it the first time. I had to watch it twice to catch it. And Goku asks him about it here, and he says that it's this family technique. And then he tells his son, I think he's speaking to Shokin whenever he says this. He says, "The light of the stars is visible to the eye, yet their true forms are unknown to it." And then he says, "Even if one learns about a technique, it remains useless until the person is strong enough to understand it or strong enough to possess the idea," right?
That's kind of that same idea of standing on the shoulders of giants without understanding their sacrifice, right?
Yeah. And so it sets up this really interesting situation for Goku, which is it's a challenge, right? Which is to say, okay, there's something about my spirit that's integrated that if you have not reached a certain level of maturity or of understanding of the world or understanding of yourself, you wouldn't even be able to integrate it. So the idea would be useless to you, right?
And of course, another point about this section, excuse me, is that Goku's ability to get the medicine for Taiken is exactly where Goku would least like to look, right? It's that idea that the salvation lies in the darkest part of the forest where a person would least like to search for it. And so Goku has to go get the medicine from the two thugs that he had already experienced earlier, right?
And what he's forced to do as well is not engage with them, right? Not win the fight, but endure their aggression.
Right. And stay focused on the task at hand, which is healing the paternal spirit rather than engaging in fisticuffs.
In the face of it.
Sure.
As we saw with the Red Ribbon Army, he was not willing to do that.
Right. And now, after he's met and interacted with Grandpa Gohan again, he is able to subordinate his spirit in that way to focus on the task at hand.
Right.
And it is some growth, and we're about to see some definite growth of Goku in the next couple of episodes because it baffles me how I didn't see it as a kid how much Goku grows. But anyways,
You just don't appreciate that dimension, right?
it's true. You really don't. So, Goku makes it back with the medicine, and at Tenlong's dojo, Tenlong terrorizes his pupils, beating them easily. Back at Taiken's house, though, Taiken tells Shokin, which is his son, that he will need to concede the fight to Tenlong, giving up the honor of his dojo, his teachings, all of that. And Shokin says that he wants to fight in his stead, but is forbidden from doing so by his father. Goku says that he wants to fight Tenlong, and Taiken agrees to Shokin's dismay. Shokin, Taiken's son, leaves to prepare breakfast for them and puts a mysterious pill into Goku's soup. Goku accepts the meal in typical fashion, and they head to the match. Tenlong is angered and is at being surprised by Goku's entry to the match, but accepts the terms, saying that he will kill him, which is entirely possible for what we've seen before with Tenlong. If Goku wasn't Goku, and if we didn't know what we knew about Goku, we could accept that he would probably die to Tenlong's mode of being. And I think it's at this point we could express that idea that Tenlong, after all, being a prodigy and almost an aristocrat in his way, that he has inherited his abilities, is somewhat the antithesis of Goku. And the fact that Goku, if he was a regular person who had not subordinated his spirit in such a way, would die to the fact that Tenlong exists is pretty pressing.
Definitely. I think that there's an establishment here of the level of spiritual malice that this could embody, and the overcoming of what this barrier means for Goku is sort of symbolic of the process that he went through in this saga, right? And so there is this acceptance of the presence of death in the face of what he's trying to resolve for himself. In saying that it is it's an integration of the malice of the world all the way up to the point of killing your identity, right? Not just killing you, but killing sort of your mode of being.
Well, it also shows too that the seed of resentment can be born within the supposed heir of the of being itself, because we see Taiken's son here is resentful towards Goku's strength and tries to poison him as a result. And that shows too that the willingness and spirit to do good, to honor thy father, right, which is exactly what Shoken is trying to do, can be a corrupting force. Like all of that that attaches one to wants and desires, according to the Buddha, right, can be a malevolent spirit within you. That's what's happened here, especially with Shoken.
Right. It's a blindness in favor of the father, right? When in reality we saw Goku asks the father what's going on with him when he's coughing, and he says that he hasn't taken good care of himself. Is specifically what he says, right? And this is a weakness of the father, not just in symptom, but
Tell me
in
about it.
spirit,
Yeah.
right?
No, I
And
mean it
so,
is. It really is that the sacrificial spirit of the father, right, is such that it necessitates the putting of one's um dependence above oneself. And so that's exactly why Gwen is a husk when we see him at the end. It's right
he's
because
blind,
he's burned himself out sacrificing for others.
right?
And so that's what we see here. It's kind of that same idea that he's coughing, he's burned himself out from that. And so Goku has to step in to take charge of it, and Shoken is not happy about that because he feels like it's his responsibility even though he's too young to adopt it.
There's a definite surprise in his encounter that he has with Goku's spirit, right? Because whenever they clash, or even before they clash, he's observing Goku's stance and he's like, there's something different about this kid. He's pointing it out even before they interact. He said, I suspected that he had some power. Then afterwards, whenever he's talking about the technique, the illusion star, Goku says, oh, is it like the after image?
Right, yeah.
And so to compare what these two attacks represent, the after image being able to sort of construct an identity for yourself and separate it from yourself in defense of yourself. And then the idea that has to do more with the stars, right?
Well, and it is to say like the after image is creating that idea which can be easily addressed that reveals an opponent's weakness. So in logical or rhetorical terms, that would be setting up a question which reveals your opponent's or your opposition's weakness such that you can debase their entire argument from it. You can debase the logic by which they orient their lives by pointing out the flaw within the reasoning by which they conduct themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're going to get to in just a second, because the fight is about to begin between Tenlong and Goku. And Goku and Tenlong begin their match, and Goku uses the afterimage technique, which is just what we were saying. Tenlong counters it with his Hyoga spinning kick. The laxative that Shoken slipped into Goku's soup, though, kicks in, the poison. And Goku calls for a break so that he can, quote, take a dump, end quote. The announcer tells him that there are no breaks in the fight, and Tenlong continues his assault until Goku defeats him with the Illusion Star Fist. After the fight, Tenlong says that he was conceited and is going to allow Taiken to train him. Shoken thanks Goku for everything and gives him a meal for the road, and all ends happily ever after.
So the after image technique versus the Hyoga spinning kick, right? Um, I don't really know if I have much to say about the spinning kick. It's an extension of what he used against Goku whenever he saw him on the bridge, which is that he dazzles him with his speed, you know, and he lays mostly inconsequential blows on him, right? Such that whenever the laxative kicks in, or the poison, or whatever it is that makes Goku need to take a dump, when it kicks in, Goku's able to withstand his blows anyway, without fully, well, taking a dump.
And I would also say that the ability for Tenlong to surpass the afterimage technique shows that his devotion towards the Hyoga school, right, and the orientation that comes with that discipline towards that endeavor, right, is able to evade the trap Goku has set for him. Because the trap Goku has set for him is my opponent truthful enough to be able to engage with this without
With the
revealing
spirit
their
of my
weakness?
argument instead of,
Right.
yeah.
With the spirit of my mode of being.
Hmm.
And so Tenlong is able to do that because the school by which he's subordinated himself is one that is worthy of that. And we see that later on because Tenlong, the spirit by which Tenlong conducts himself, is able to admit the fact that he is conceited and allows Taiken to train him later.
Well, we also see, he did say in public he manipulated his image in that sense, but he said in public that he needed, it seems as though he at least thought that he needed to make what his brother had done right in a public sense. Maybe not in a private sense because he has a vengeful spirit, right? But it's almost like a vengeful spirit that wants to still honor some sort of balance.
And the very fact that he still wants to honor that actually takes him a long way. And so it ends with Goku defeating him with the Illusion Star Fist, which is what he learned from Taiken, right?
So this is really interesting to me because Taiken, whenever he was talking about it, was saying the metaphor he was making there was specifically that you can see the technique and you can respect the technique, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to understand or integrate it because that doesn't necessarily mean that you are on the level to actually act it out into the world, right? To create more of it. And so the shock here,
Which
or the
is a
reveal,
wisdom revealed by the paternal spirit.
right? And so the shock here, or you could say the reveal here, is that Goku integrates it just from one encounter and uses it to protect the spirit of the father.
Right. And by protecting the spirit of the father, he gains the admiration of the village and corrects what is malazing the town in the first place.
Now, the specific malazing, the specific corruption that is being fixed in this episode is the attitude of the son, right?
Not only the attitude of the son, but the son. Because Tenlong is the firstborn son of that family, and Shoken is the firstborn son of Taiken's family. And so it's a complete circle of both of them, right? It's
Yes.
orienting them both of them simultaneously towards what they need.
It's telling the protagonist to see from the point of view of the son so that you can honor the spirit of the father as part of your heroic arc. And so we do have two sons here.
And the last thing I want to mention is that Goku doesn't recognize the malice inherent in the poison that Shoken put in his soup. He actually willfully decides to ignore it, choosing instead to accept the benevolent position that it was a good soup and it was made in the intention of helping him.
Right.
And that ability to be charitable in the face of pure malice is something that the human spirit has acknowledged wholly as something that is good.
Yeah. And it's
I
it's
mean, think about like I don't know if you've read or seen Les Mis, but the convict that goes to the bishop's house, and the bishop, he steals from the bishop, and when the cops report him, the bishop says, "But you forgot these," and he gives him two silver candlesticks and says, "Take these as well." He stole the silverware, but he forgot the candlesticks, and he says, "Give these here, take them, but now your soul belongs to God." So it's a pretty poignant message, right? And that's what happens here too with Goku. It's now that you have tried to poison me, and now that you've given your you've subordinated your ego to admit your conceit. Now your soul belongs to a higher order of being. And that's kind of the gift that Goku gives to both of these characters.
Right, and what does a higher order being do but to take that and process it and turn it into something good, right? And that's what Goku is doing. And it's this kind of, it's funny how we see it played out in this metaphor of feeding, right? Because it's like he feeds him something that makes him sick. He processes it and turns it into something good anyway. And then he gives him a real meal for the road.
Yeah. Something that really nourishes him. So, I
And
think
I just want to say that specifically the arc of this episode has to do with the attitude of the son, because we see he doesn't respect Goku from the beginning. He talks bad about him to his father. His father tells him specifically, don't be conceited. And then he tells him Goku is like the stars or the sky as you are to the earth. Right? Because he recognizes in Goku that Goku's mode of being honors the spirit of the father and even elevates it. And his son is very conceited and resentful of that. And so we see him training at night.
but for a reason, like, because he feels that he is responsible for the responsibilities laid down by the absence of his father, which can't always be assumed. But at the same time, it's not something unholy that leads him down that path.
No, I
just wanna
wouldn't say
mention
that. Yeah, but it is a weakness, right? A weakness of
I agree. Yeah.
of the attitude toward the spirit of the father that needs to be set right.
Yeah.
And so it's great that we get that set up from the very beginning of the episode. And as it goes along, he blames Goku for the sickness that he sees in his father at one point, right? And it's him not appreciating the thing that actually would heal his father.
Well, that's almost like the Derek Harris and Dylan Klebold thing of Columbine, like blaming being itself
Exactly.
for the fact that there's malaise in the world.
He's like, the existence of you is why he has worn himself out. That's what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
And so that is his relationship to that positive
Which
being
makes him
expression.
put that pill and makes him poison Goku in the first place.
That's that Cain and Abel sort of, my father's sacrifices haven't been good enough and yours are, sort of attitude, right? And so he poisons him in that sense. And there is the heroic spirit in Goku that redeems that, right? That takes the filth or takes the corrupting nature into himself and withstands the nature of being, or withstands the malice of being, and is able to then elevate himself beyond that, you could say, physical poisoning or that physical corruption, such that he uses the star technique after basically not having to be told what it is. And so we see that it's mythical in that sense that his father says that people can't do this, right? He says that you can glimpse the splendor of a star or whatever, but that doesn't mean that you grasp the fullness of it. And we see that Goku grasps the fullness of the star
without being able to articulate it, but being able to.
But he's so oriented truthfully, right, that he is able to express it. And so Goku redeems it in that sense. And that's that sort of self-archetype continuation here in this episode.
Yep. I think that pretty much covers it all. Anything else?
No. I think that's plenty to say about a filler episode.
Very plenty. 37 minutes, I'd say. Well, if you guys like what you heard, please give us a like, a subscribe. We upload on YouTube Mondays and Thursdays, Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays. We would love to hear what you have to say in the comments, whether you agree, whether you disagree. We just like to hear your engagement. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
And this was Get the Mic, episode 80, Goku versus Sky Dragon. We hope you guys have a good night.
I'll never forget the day he showed up. And so, he told us I have not only mastered Goku's powers, I have made them my own.